what is that one? What is that big company that they just released some? They just hired Robert Downey Jr. to give him millions of dollars to OnePlus. Yeah, OnePlus 7. They have this new phone that doesn't have a front-facing camera. You press a button, it slides out of the top. They figured out a way to make it the entire phone all screen. And they're incredibly advanced in terms of their electronics. We deeply are concerned that they're going to be the ones that implement military, autonomous, sentient robotics before we do. Because then you can launch them with no physical human cost on your side. And I mean, they're literally weapons of mass destruction if you have robots that can go over there and just kill people.
And what they need for that is the world's fastest supercomputer, right? And what's interesting is that we America just overtook the Chinese in having the world's fastest supercomputer, but they had it for a couple years. And think about this, okay? Because you were saying, hard to believe the Nazis were only, not even like just in our grandfather's age, right?
Yeah.
So go back in time to then. Listen to this about this. Really freaked me out in terms of progress. Right after the war, a guy called John von Neumann got a grant from the Atomic Energy Commission to essentially build the world's first computer. I mean, they existed, but he built the first computer that could actually do calculations, okay? Before that, calculations were done by calculators. Computers were humans. But there's this amazing story of von Neumann in the basement of the Princeton Institute for Advanced Study where he built this computer with government funds. And because he was a brilliant polymath, he could add faster than anyone around him. Okay, he's also the guy who calculated at what level the atomic bomb should explode over Hiroshima for the most blast. Okay, because it didn't hit the ground, it wouldn't kill as many people, right? So this is how his mind worked. So he's faster than the computer. He has a pen and paper in front of him, and he can outperform the world's fastest computer with his own brain. 2.5 years into it, in 1949, the computer beats him. And he made a statement then that said, one day, artificially intelligent machines will be the ruin of man. I mean, I'm paraphrasing. But that was his prediction. But that was in 1949.
In the 50s, Marshall McLuhan said that we are the sex organs of the machine world.
I'm going to have to really think about that.
That's a deep one.
That is very deep.
Yeah, that we are the propagators. We're the ones who are...
We're the progenitors.
Yeah, that's it.
That's our baby.
Yeah.
We're going to make that baby, and then we're going to die.
Most likely, that's going to be the new living thing.
Who said that?
Marshall McLuhan. Okay. Yeah. Just stop and think about that. Figuring that out in the 50s. Just looking around and going, oh,
right.
We're giving birth to these things.
But I have a question for you then on that morality issue, right? Which is, if man has always been a warring animal, right? Why do we look so down upon the throat, the knife to the throat? And why do we as a society accept drone strikes? Because that's the whole question I ask in Surprise, Kill, Vanish, and I'm not sure I answered it to my own satisfaction because it's such a complicated question.
Well, one of them is very personal. The other one is like a video game. To stab someone, to look them in the eye and shove a knife through their ribs, it takes a different kind of person, and we don't think we want that person around us.
Interesting. You think it's a proximity issue?
It's just different. One of them is throwing a rock at someone that's nowhere near you. The other one is beating a guy to death when he's right in front of you. It's very personal. You see someone struggling, and we don't like to think that someone can put that aside and still twist that blade. We don't want that. We don't want that on our side. We don't want our people to be noble and just. But meanwhile, when it comes to civilian casualties, drones are one of the worst invention ever in human history. If we really want to examine ourselves in terms of efficacy and the moral high ground in terms of engagement, like launching missiles at apartment buildings because you found metadata in there that indicates that most likely an Al-Qaeda operative has a cell phone in that building. Like that's some shit that people have done. I mean, that has been done. And the casualty rate for civilians when it comes to drone strikes, for innocent civilians, is stunning. I think it's in the high 80%. I think we've done this before, right? Haven't we? I think it's a disturbing, I might be conservative by saying it's in the 80s. It might be in the 90s. It's a disturbingly high number of people who died who were not the intended target.
Which would be an argument
for the blade.
For the blade.
Yeah, the blade
right?
is, you know who you're stabbing.
And that warrior is going in there aware that he too might die.
What do you got, Jamie? What's that face?
3%?
3% what?
That's what this says.
That's horseshit.
I know.
Who released that? Maybe 3% accuracy. No, I know there's been some serious discussions among scholars about this. And that's not true. Whatever you're reading, it can't be right.
Yeah.
So
Maybe
just
it's one operation was 3%.
just to throw this out there, because there is that big debate. CIA, paramilitary army, tiny.
Yeah.
Defense Department, huge. CIA using either ground operators or drones.
Mm-hmm.
Defense Department, I read the statistic the other day. 7,200 and change bombs dropped on Afghanistan last year. I mean, people don't even realize we're still 7,000.
Are they just practicing? Here it goes. President Donald Trump revoked a requirement that U.S. intelligence officials publicly report the number of civilian kills in drone strikes and other attacks on terrorist targets outside of war zones. Oh, so we're going to get shit information now. But pull up 2017.
I don't know
It
that
might be gone
you
now.
have to find. Well, you got to really look hard to get that statistic. There's an inspector general who covers Afghanistan, right, for the government. He looks at all the statistics. And by the way, this administration just canceled his job, so we will no longer have that information.
Oh, geez.
But he's the one that is in charge of reporting that, because it's called the reconstruction effort, right? But that number of bombs really makes you think long and hard, or at least me, about, the big footprint versus the small operation. And I think this is why most people don't want to talk about this, because it's a dark rabbit hole to go down,
It really is.
People prefer to believe that we're just safe and sound here and not at risk. And I mean, that's the endless question of, are these threats real, and must they be dealt with?
Head to head changes the game completely.
It's pretty nerve-wracking. What a showdown! Oh, my goodness! American Ninja Warrior, May 29th at Unda Da Sea.
What do you want when you go on vacation? How about adventure or just relaxation? You might want an edge where your mind grows wings, or maybe a place to see spectacular things. How about a road where you can get your kicks? Throw music and art into your bag of trips. This is the land of wonders, far and wide. When you're in Oklahoma, just enjoy the ride. Visit travelok.com and explore. Come see for yourself when you want to see more.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
But back to your core point, I mean, that's the reason why I also write science fiction, is that the world of science is changing so fast that we really need to apply a lot of imagination to imagine where it's going. Because if you're just looking at what's happening now, it's like this train is going to speed by you. We have to kind of imagine. It's like Wayne Gretzky. We have to imagine where the puck is going to be, not where it is now. And I mentioned George Church, he's at Harvard. He's like the living Charles Darwin. And I do a lot of speaking alongside George. And it's become our little thing that he says that he reads science fiction like mine, and then and says, well, that's pretty cool. How can we do that? And what I do is I look at the research coming out of labs like George's, and I say, all right, well, that's where we are now. What's that going to mean in 20, 50, 100 years? And so we have to, the science fiction plays a more important role than it ever has in kind of imagining where we're going. And it's that imagining that allows us to try to say, well, what if that's one of the options of where we're going? What are the decisions that we need to make now so that we can have a better outcome rather than a worse one?
If you're a gambling person, I don't know if you are, but if I had to give you $100 to put on something in 20 years that's going to be profoundly just it's going to change us in a way that is something that we're not really prepared to understand or deal with. What do you think that's going to be?
I think it's going to be predictive genetics. That we're going to have right now, it's like you go to your doctor when you're sick. This could have been some genetic disorder that you had from the moment you were conceived.
And it was ticking.
And you showed up 50 years later when that's been manifest. So it's going to be very different. You're taking your kid home from the hospital, your newborn. And the doctor says, hey, congratulations, this is really great. But just FYI, your kid has a 50% greater than average chance of getting early onset Alzheimer's 50 years from now. And your kid has a really great chance of being phenomenal at abstract math. Like, how are we going to think about that? How are we going to think about what it means to be human when we have all of that information? And there are things now that we call fate. And it's just a different model. And so I think that, and once we have that, that's going to change a lot of things. It's going to fundamentally transform our healthcare. What we call healthcare now is really sick care. You show up with a symptom. And this is going to be predictive, and it's going to change the way we make babies, because people are going to have real choices about which embryos to implant, and we're going to have a lot of information about a lot of really intimate stuff.
So you feel like genetic manipulation and genetic engineering, genetic understanding, genetic knowledge, and then applied genetic medicine.
Yes.
Those are going to be the big changes in the next 20 years, even more so than technology.
Well, it's interconnected, because it's like a super convergence of these technologies. So the genetics revolution is the artificial intelligence revolution, in the sense that the complexity of genetics is so great. It's way beyond what our brains on their own could process. And so really, all these technologies are touching each other, and so the biological models are now influencing the AI. So, for example, we are coming to the limits of silicon storage, but DNA has unlimited storage capacity. So it's as I've said before, the boundaries between biology and AI, or genetics and AI, is going to be very blurry.
Yeah, that is an interesting concept, right? The idea of storing information in DNA,
right.
And that has been discussed.
Yeah, well, DNA is the greatest information storage mechanism ever imagined.
But the question is, what happens when you do store things in there, and how does that information interact with all the rest of the stuff that's in your body already?
Well, I mean, if you can do it in your body, it doesn't have to be in your body. But just think of your DNA has 4 billion years of history, and it's done a great job of recording it. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Like I have old 8-track tapes. They haven't lasted.
That is a squirrely concept, that you have all that data inside your head. I mean, that's also when people when they try to understand instincts that people have, that these are some sort of genetically encoded memories, or some understanding of things that are dangerous, and that they're in there because this is how we've learned over the years without actually having to experience these things personally.
No, so it's baked in. Our genetics are baked into us. And so, I don't know if you've been to Indonesia before. I was in Indonesia, and I went to this place called Komodo Island.
Oh, wow, where the dragons
are?
It's
the Komodo dragons are. And it was fascinating, because it's like, you can tell they don't have plaintiff's attorneys. So you're just walking around, there are all these Komodo dragons, and so, these are like the most deadly creatures on Earth, and there's like some little guy with a little stick, and it's like, how effective is that stick? But the way it works...
So you're just walking around?
You're just walking around. Because the Komodo dragons, when they're not killing people or killing animals, they're just sitting there.
Oh,
and so,
Jesus
so it's pretty scary.
Do they ever get jacked? Do people ever go there and get bitten?
Yes, and they say, it's only a few times a year. It's like, well, a few times a year, that seems like a lot.
A few times a year is a lot.
Anyway, but the way it works for a Komodo dragon, a mother lays the egg and then buries the egg and then forgets where the egg is. And then, let's just say that this egg hatches and this little Komodo dragon comes out, and the mother sees her own baby Komodo dragon. She'll eat it in a second.
Oh, Jesus.
And so if you're a Komodo dragon, you better have your entire survival strategy baked into your DNA because nobody's teaching you anything. And so for us, we have this sense that it's like parenting is really important. It is. Environment is really important. It is. But so much of who and what we are is baked into our genetics. And I think that's going to be this challenge. We're going to see ourselves as increasingly genetic beings. We can't become genetic determinists, think that we're just genetics, but we're going to know a lot more. We're going to demystify a lot of what it means to be a human.
Poof.
Yeah. Poof is right.
But are we going to lose the romance and the just the randomness of life because of that?
Yeah.
That's what people are concerned with, right?
Yeah.
Like, if we have some sort of genetic uniformity, especially in particular with like things like intelligence and athletic performance, we're not going to appreciate freaks as much.
Yeah, or maybe we'll all want to be freaks because
we're definitely all gonna wanna be
freaks
freaks.
are the ones who push us. And so I think
You're not going to want to be a moron.
Yeah, well, your question, it's the essential question. It's like, what makes a human? A human isn't just someone with higher
Right.
IQ. That doesn't make you a better human. That makes you someone with a higher IQ. But how are we going to think about constructing societies when it's up to us? Like, if we are going to say we value certain people, certain ideas, I think we're going to need artists. Like right now, people like artists are sometimes in the mainstream, sometimes they're on the fringe, but artists are going to be maybe the most important people in this new world. And right now in hospitals, we have kind of a hierarchy, and like the most technical people are the people who are valued the most. And the least technical people, like some of the nurses or nurses' aides, are the people who are often valued and paid the least. But when technology can do these technological feats, what's going to be left is how can we be great humans? How can we emote? How can we connect? How can we create art? And if we get swept away by this tide of science, and you know how excited I am about science, but if we could really undermine our humanity.
Right, and as for humans, what humans value is many aspects of that humanity:
Yeah.
the art, the creations, the literature, things.
Yeah.
We when you read someone's great prose, you're reading like an insight into their mind, and that's what's interesting about it, right?
Yeah.
You're not going to get that from just ones and zeros.
Yeah, and there will always be this, we call it mystery. And even if we can do a genetic analysis of Shakespeare and Mozart and whatever, like it's still miraculous, and we need to celebrate that. And we can't allow us to say that we are just our genetics or even just our biology, but we also can't just say biology has nothing to do with it, and especially because we're going to know more about our biology and about our differences, and that's normal. I mean, it used to be in the old days that everyone thought, well, God is weather. And now we understand weather pretty much, and nobody's saying, oh, that lightning, that's God delivering a message. It could be, but we still have that mystery. And I think that it's, in some ways, it's about our orientation. Like, how do we make sure that we keep this view of life, that we have artists and humanists who are just at the core of this conversation about where we're going?
What if that mystery ultimately turns out to just be ignorance, and that as you develop more and more understanding, there's less and less mystery? Would we like to be less smart? Would we like to be more overwhelmed by possibility? I mean,
it could be. I think
could that be part of what romance is?
It could be, and certainly like the unknown. We wake up every morning, and we just don't know the answer. And there are some people, like going back to the issues of life extension. There are some people who say, well, that death is essential for appreciating life. I talk about this stuff all around. And then there are people who say, you're talking about eliminating these terrible diseases, but I know somebody who had that terrible disease, and their suffering was a gift to everybody else because we all had more humanity in response to their suffering. I was like, well, that's kind of screwed up. I'd prefer them to not have that suffering, but
those people are thinking wacky.
It's wacky. But we need to, I totally agree with you that if we allow ourselves to get swept away with this kind of scientific determinism, if we don't say we really value our humanistic traditions, our artists, cultures, we could get lost and
become obsolete.
We could become obsolete, but we could also just become less human. There's something wonderful, and there's magic.
Do you think that monkeys used to think, man, I can't become a human, we become less monkey?
Yeah,
Do you know what I'm saying?
But no being looks in the mirror and recognizes that they are evolving. You know, we've only been Homo sapiens for about 300,000 years.
Right.
So it's hard. We know where we've come from because you see all those little charts from high school biology. But it's really hard for people to imagine being something else in the future. It's outside of our consciousness. And so
it's H.G. Wells squared.
Yeah, and we are monkeys. It's just that we've redefined our monkey thing. You know, we do it with in a little different way.
Aurora systems are running on local reserve power, unable to remotely download
The Joe Rogan experience.
You're aware of Elon Musk's Neuralink technology.
Yeah.
How much do you know about it?
I know a decent amount, and my friend Brian Johnson, he has a company, Kernel. There's a few different companies that are trying to think about these brain-machine interfaces.
And what are they trying to do?
Basically, what they're trying to do is to find a way to connect our brains to our machines. And there's a little bit of progress. Our brains they're incredibly complicated and they're messy. I mean, there's a lot that's happening. But we are increasingly figuring out how to connect our brains to our technology, and so people are imagining a time when we can do things like download memories, download ideas, or upload memories and upload ideas. And there's some very early science that is suggesting that this will be possible, but it's still the very early days.
The very early days. But Elon was giving the impression that sometime this year they're going to release something.
You know, they may release something, but it's not going to be something that's going to change the world, because that technology is way more nascent than even the genetics technology that I've been talking about. So it's not like that it's at all remotely possible that this year you're going to be able to like upload a full memory or download a full memory. But there are little things that are happening, but every journey begins with a step.
But the technology is fairly transparent in terms of like where the state of the art is right now?
It is, in that it's extremely early. This stuff is, so when you think of like about systems that we understand, I mentioned that we understand just a little bit about genomics. We know less about the brain. The brain is kind of the great unknown of this universe. We know more about the oceans than we know about our brain. I mean, we know very, very little. We understand that if you kind of stick an electric current in somebody's brain, like that's going to, if you kind of shoot a spike through somebody's head, but really understanding how the brain functions, we're still in the very, very early days.
So do you think that Kurzweil's off with this idea that you're going to be able to download your consciousness into a computer? Because that's one of the most controversial ideas that he's come up with, right?
So I think he's off based on your use of the word "your." So I mentioned that a month ago I was in Kyoto, and I was at this stem cell lab. But I also went to another lab of a guy named Hiroshi Ishiguro, who's the world's leading humanoid roboticist. And so he's the guy who was on the cover of Wired, and he's created these robot avatars. And like I had a conversation with this robot woman, Erica. And it was really interesting because I could see that like if I would smile, she'd smile and lean forward. And if I had like a over-exaggerated sad face, she'd like change her expression. And she can have like basic conversations. But we're still a long way, and so from having full robotics. But I had this full robotic human interactions. But I had this debate with Ishiguro, and he was saying that he thought that the future of humanity was non-biological. That we were going to kind of unload ourselves to these non-biological entities, and that is how we would gain our immortality. And I argued something very different. I feel like we are biological beings. I think we'll fully integrate with our technology, but if we ever become entirely non-biological, then that's not us. Either we will have committed suicide as a species, or these robots will have killed us. Because even if, let's just say, that I could download my entire consciousness to some kind of robot, and let's just say that was possible, that robot would be me for that first exact moment when the transfer happened. But then beyond that, it wouldn't be me anymore, because there would be a whole other set of experience. But certainly our interaction, our connectivity with this tech is going to be greater. And so even if Kurzweil isn't exactly right, he's directionally right.
Yeah, the problem would be that you would be locked in. Like, if they downloaded your consciousness into some sort of a bank of computers somewhere,
Right.
where are you? If that's your
Yeah.
consciousness is
Yeah.
in these ones and zeros.
Yeah.
And that's terrifying.
Yeah.
What's terrifying is if somebody didn't like you and they said, "I'm going to make one version of you suffer for all eternity."
Yeah, yeah,
And I'm going
But
to just
here,
download you while you sleep.
It's true. But I have something worse than that.
Okay.
Death. And so I think that nobody is going to say, well, I'm going to be Joe living a life, or I'm going to not be Joe and I'll just have my consciousness downloaded someplace else. And so if the comparison is, well, I've lived this life and I don't want to die, and so I'd rather kind of be here in some kind of version, and even if it's not me, it's just something.
Really?
I think some people will want that. Not
I think
everybody.
some people will, but they don't know what they're getting, right?
Yes.
In terms of you don't know what that experience is going to be like,
Yeah.
nor do you know if there is some sort of a chemical gateway that happens in
Yes.
the mind when
Yeah.
you do expire and allows you to pass through to the other dimension that
Yeah.
your consciousness and your soul longs to travel to. But no, you've
I hope you're
downloaded
right
it.
about that.
I'm definitely not right.
Yeah, I've written about this in my novel. It's like, yeah, but I think kind of when you're dead, you're just dead. And the
Why
good
do you
news
think
for you
that, though?
well, just because I think that this kind of immortality comes because time stops. Time is this relative concept, and so at the moment that you die, that's immortality for you because time stops flowing for you. That's what Einstein taught us. Time is this relative concept. Other people, very legitimately, and there's no way to prove it, feel that we have this soul, and this soul can travel to other dimensions. I happen to believe that we are biological beings, and our experience of the soul, whatever, is connected to our biology. When our biology stops functioning, those experiences, whatever they are, stop being accessible, at least to us.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
What essentially was hacking Dharma? Like, what was the motivation
Yeah.
behind it? Was it for a person like me, or was
Right.
it for the everyone? Like,
It's for everyone. And so what I really wanted to do, so the background, I can give you just a little bit of
Sure.
background. So more than 20 years ago, I was working on the National Security Council, and my then boss, Richard Clark, who was then this obscure White House official who was jumping up and down saying, we need to be focusing on terrorism and Al-Qaeda and bin Laden. And he was trying to tell everybody, and nobody was paying attention to. He was totally marginalized. And when 9/11 happened, Dick's memo was on George Bush's desk saying exactly that. We need to focus on Al-Qaeda. Here's what's going to happen. And Dick, even before then, would always tell me that if everyone in Washington was focusing on one thing, you could be sure there was something much more important that was being missed. And so more than 20 years ago, I was looking around, I saw these little pieces of disparate information, and I came to the conclusion that the genetics revolution was going to change everything. So I educated myself, I started writing articles, I was invited to testify before Congress, and then to try to get that story out, I wrote my two most recent near-term sci-fi novels, Genesis Code and Eternal Sonata. And when I was on book tours for those, and I explained the science to people, the way a kind of a self-educated citizen scientist and a novelist would explain the science, all of a sudden people got it. And that was when I realized I needed to write a book about the genetics revolution that people could absorb, that wouldn't scare people. But my mission for the book is that this stuff, as we've talked about, it's so important that everybody needs to be part of the conversation. We have this brief window, and what I'm calling for is this species-wide dialogue on the future of human genetic engineering, and I have a whole game plan in the book about what people can do, how they can get involved, and people individually, on a national level. We have to put a lot of pressure on our elected leaders and say, stop focusing on the crap. There is really important stuff that needs to be addressed, and we need leadership. I'm speaking in Congress a week and a half from now, talking about these issues. So we need to have, and on an international level, we have to have some kind of international system. We're so far away from being able to do that. We don't even know what the standards are, but we have to be pushing. And so,
you think of it in terms of like the same way we have with like nuclear weapons?
Yeah, in many ways, yeah. But the thing is, with nuclear weapons, a lot of that happened at the state level, at the country level. This needs to happen at a popular level. and at a government level.
So the only way that that's going to happen effectively is we need real comprehensive education on the subject. It's not something that people can just guess, right? They need to know what's the consequences, where we're at right now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and that's like Sanjay Gupta had a wonderful quote that's actually on the cover of my book, which is, if you can read one book on the future of our species, this is it. So what I've tried to do is to say, like, if you just want to go to one place to understand what's happening, what's at stake, what it means for you, and what you can do now if you want to get involved, I've tried to do that. But then, ironically, I'm now, like as I mentioned, being asked to speak to thousands of doctors and scientists because they're all reading this book and they're saying, this is positioning my work in a much bigger context.
Sanjay Gupta is a very interesting cat because he was very anti-marijuana and then started doing research on it and then totally flipped 180 degrees, which to me is a great sign of both humility and intelligence. He recognized that the data was different than his presuppositions. Yeah. He had these prejudices that were very common. Yeah. Now, when you speak to Congress, do they brief you in terms of like what they would like specifically for you to address?
No. So this one, I've been asked to go and speak, and a lot of members of Congress who are going to be invited. And what I'm going to tell them is, look, this is really important. Our Congress is not doing enough, and here are the things that we need to do. And
what are you going to say to try to really get it into their head?
What I'm going to say is that the genetics revolution is here. If we don't have a system, if we don't have a rational system to manage it, if we don't have a system, you talked about public education. The challenge that we face in the United States is we traditionally have had a representative democracy. And now we're transitioning from a representative democracy to a popular democracy. So Switzerland has a popular democracy, but they have like really well-educated people who have enough information to make smart decisions. We haven't educated our public, and yet the public is making big decisions, and a lot of it is happening just on a gut feeling. That's what's happening with trade agreements, where people just have a feeling it's bad without the ability to really get into the details. And so we are having that transition, which means there's a lot of responsibility on us to educate our public. And it's a tragedy. We treat people in this country like you can just throw people away. Like if you're in some crappy school system, and your chances of success are
a controlled descent. Captain!
Exiting sleep mode. Loading voice recognition. Engineer Barclay and Chief Technology Officer Yu identified.
Drone, get me a propulsion cannon.
Repulsion cannon retrieved.
Hey, Berkeley. Install that circuit box with that repulsion cannon and you'll punch a hole in the cargo bay.
Damn it, Drone, I said propulsion, not repulsion. Recalibrate sensors.
Senses recalibrated.
Sensors aren't the problem. I tweaked the program. It's like you now. It doesn't like being told what to do.
Drone, I know...
His name's Albert now.
Albert, I know it's not your fault, but it would really help me do my job if you'd bring me what I asked for. Thanks for your time.
Propulsion cannon retrieved.
Thank you. Now go away.
Entering hibernation mode.
Boss, this hobby of yours isn't making my job any easier. Or safer.
Maybe so, but it's all that's stopping me from being so bored I take a spacewalk in my skivvies.
Integrating new PDA data. Integrating new PDA data. Integrating new PDA data. Integrating new PDA data. Up a faint black box signature originating on the other side of the hull breach in this room. New blueprint acquired. Integrating new PDA data. Integrating new PDA data. Integrating new PDA data. New blueprint acquired. Data bank corruption was detected on your PDA. Your technology blueprints have been updated. New blueprint acquired.
Yeah.
New blueprint acquired. Integrating new PDA data. New blueprint acquired. Integrating new PDA data. Integrating new PDA data. Integrating new PDA data. New blueprint acquired. New blueprint acquired. Average long-range transmission delay, 8 hours. Opening last recorded transmissions.
This is an emergency distress call. Aurora is on collision course with planet 4546b. Sending all available environmental data. Please respond with rescue solution. Out.
This is Altera HQ. Attached to this message, you should find the blueprints for an escape ship that we calculate will be capable of breaking orbit and getting you back to the nearest phase gate. Now, it's designed to use materials you can find in situ, but it's gonna need one hell of a power source. Now, we'll be sure to...
Aurora long-range communications relay offline. The drive core shielding sustained internal damage during collision. Do not attempt repair without appropriate qualifications. Warning, local radiation at maximum tolerable level. New blueprint acquired. Welcome aboard, Captain. Partially translated broadcast.
9 new biological subjects designated. Mode. Hunting. Analyzing. Sharing subject locations with other agents.
Oxygen.